One afternoon at the royal palace, the Spanish ambassador arrives for a formal audience with the King of France. He is escorted through the corridors, past guards and courtiers, and the great doors swing open. And what does he find? The most powerful monarch in Europe, the man who ended 30 years of religious civil war, who united a shattered nation, who conquered his own capital and converted his faith to save his people. The king looks up. He doesn't stand. He doesn't flinch. He simply asks, Monsieur Ambassador, are you a father? The ambassador nods. Then, says the king, I may finish my trip around the room. This is the scene captured in Henry IV and His Children, painted by Pierre Revoy in 1813. And the reason this particular moment was painted, and repainted again and again, by different artists across the 19th century, has much to do with politics as it does with parenthood. Let's look at what Revoy actually gives us. The painting is divided sharply into two worlds by a single open door. On the left, the ambassador steps in from a bright corridor, his red cloak sweeping behind him, his plumped hat in one hand, his other hand raised in surprise, or restraint, at what he sees. Behind him, through the doorway, the outlines of guards and attendants are visible in the light. He is the outside world, protocol, diplomacy, the rigid machinery of power. The room is richly furnished. Heavy curtains, a tiled floor, a portrait on the wall, and chairs or courtly furniture fading into shadow. And there on the floor kneels Henry IV, King of France. He wears a golden doublet and a blue sash bearing the cross of the Order of the Holy Spirit. His face is turned upward, bearded, composed, almost amused. There is no embarrassment in him, no scramble to recover dignity. He kneels because he chooses to. On Henry's back sits his two sons, Louis the Dauphin, the future Louis XIII, and his younger brother Gaston, Duke of Orleans. Both boys are riding on him as if their father has become a horse. Louis sits in front, dressed in blue-green, while little Gaston sits behind him, clinging close and holding the blue flag embroidered with golden fleur-de-lis. The scene is playful, almost absurd. The King of France transformed, for a moment, into nothing more than a father playing with his children. Behind them stands Marie de Medici, Henry's queen. She wears a pale blue gown with white lace, her expression calm but guarded, watching the intrusion unfold. Scattered around him are the remnants of the children's games: cards, a small ball, discarded toys. A sword and other courtly objects lie nearby, set aside. He has traded his role as ruler for his role as father, and he doesn't care who sees it. This anecdote, probably apocryphal, first appeared in print in the Memorial Pittoresque de la France in 1786, just 3 years before the French Revolution would destroy the monarchy entirely. The story was already popular, but it took on a completely different meaning depending on when you told it. Henry IV was born in 1553 in the castle of Pau, in the foothills of the Pyrenees. He was raised Protestant by his mother, Jeanne d'Albret, Queen of Navarre, in a France that was tearing itself apart over religion. The wars of religion, 8 successive conflicts between Catholics and Huguenots, had devastated the country for decades. Henry survived the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572 by a thread, narrowly escaping assassination in Paris while thousands of Protestants were slaughtered around him. When he inherited the French throne in 1589, he was a Protestant king in a Catholic nation. His capital, Paris, refused to let him in, so he did something extraordinary. In 1593, he converted to Catholicism, reportedly declaring, "Paris is worth a mass," a phrase that has echoed through French history as the ultimate act of political pragmatism. He entered Paris. He ended the wars. He signed the Edict of Nantes in 1598, granting unprecedented religious tolerance to Protestants. He rebuilt roads, reformed taxes, stabilized the economy. The French called him Le Bon Roi Henri, Good King Henry, and he became, over the centuries, perhaps the most beloved monarch in the country's history. On May 14th, 1610, he was assassinated. François Ravaillac, a Catholic fanatic convinced that the king was planning to wage war against the Pope, stabbed him twice in his carriage. Henry was 56 years old. His eldest son, Louis, was 8. The boy who once rode on his father's back would become Louis XIII, a far more distant, far more complicated king. Now here's why this painting matters beyond the anecdote. Pierre Ravoy painted it in 1813. Napoleon Bonaparte was Emperor of France. The Bourbon dynasty, Henry IV's dynasty, had been swept away by the Revolution and was living in exile. But Napoleon understood something crucial. The French people still loved Henry IV. His image was untouchable, so Napoleon didn't suppress Henry's memory. He exploited it. He encouraged paintings and engravings of Henry IV, positioning himself as the heir to that same tradition of strong, pragmatic, nation-building leadership. A painting of Henry IV playing with his children wasn't just charming. It was a political statement that a powerful ruler could also be humane. Ravoy was the perfect artist for this kind of work. Born in Lyon in 1776, he studied under Jacques-Louis David, the most powerful painter in France and Napoleon's own visual propagandist. But where David painted enormous canvases of Roman senators and coronation ceremonies, Ravoy went in a completely different direction. He became one of the founders of what critics would later call the troubadour style. Small, meticulously detailed historical paintings set in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, filled with period-accurate costumes, furniture, and architecture. These were not grand statements about empires. They were intimate scenes, domestic moments, emotional snapshots from the past. Ravoy was obsessed with historical accuracy. He was also an avid collector of medieval objects, armor, textiles, carved furniture, which he used as props and eventually donated to the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Lyon. After Napoleon fell and the Bourbons returned to power in 1815, this painting took on yet another meaning. Now, it wasn't just a charming anecdote about a good king. It was a legitimization of the restored monarchy. Henry IV was the first Bourbon king. By celebrating him, the painting was celebrating the dynasty that had just reclaimed the throne. The work was exhibited at the Salon of 1817, 2 years into the Restoration, where audiences could read it as both nostalgic tribute and a political endorsement. But strip all the politics, all the dynasties, all the calculations of power, and what you have is something much simpler. A father on the floor with his children, a man who ran a country, fought wars, survived assassination attempts, negotiated with popes and princes, and when the door opened and the outside world demanded his attention, he didn't jump up. He stayed down. He finished the game. And that question he asked the ambassador, "Are you a father?" is the key to everything. Because it's not really a question, it's a test. If you are a father, you understand. If you're not, no explanation will be enough. I'd love to know what you think about this painting, and whether it changes how you see the relationship between power and tenderness. Tell me in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.